Hi there, welcome to Euromaxx Highlights, the best bits from this week's shows. Here's a quick look at what we've got in store for you today. Stuntman Fabio Wibner is a daredevil biker from Austria. Food Temple Salo is a top restaurant in Ukraine. And Jewelry Days, featuring gold and glitter event in Vienna. Well, first up, we travel to Austria to meet a 22-year-old biker who is a professional and YouTube star. Fabio Wibner regularly uploads his stunning stunts to the video platform, where he has almost 800,000 subscribers. In fact, his clips have attracted over 90 million views in total. It's no wonder. He basically does parkour on a bike, jumping over walls, hopping from roof to roof, and performing gravity-defying stunts. His latest extreme sightseeing tour is set in the Austrian capital, Vienna.
Fabio Wibner gets his kicks from exhilarating downhill rides and somewhat unusual routes, as residents of cities across Europe, in this case Vienna, can testify. The bike he rides is smaller and more maneuverable than a mountain bike, making it ideal for stunts.
A trials bike can do almost everything. Backflips, jumps, turns, whatever. You have complete creative license. That's what I find fascinating about trials biking, the freedom to do what you want. There are no real stipulations like there are in other sports.
Fabio often practices his stunts on this square in his hometown of Innsbruck, Austria. He's been honing his skills almost every day for the past 7 years. The biggest and most dangerous challenges in his repertoire are back and front flips. Crashes and falls are inevitable in this sport. Some tricks take years of practice to perfect.
When I want to overcome a new challenge, first I think over what I need to accomplish the trick. What position do I need to put my body in? How I move around on the bike. I go through the moves in my head, and then all I can do is practice, practice, practice.
Fabio also uploads his stunts to YouTube, where over 750,000 subscribers get updates on his thrills and spills. He also embeds the videos of his adventures in stories. His breakneck bike tour of Vienna, for example, is his way of getting to the World Volleyball Championships as quickly as possible. And when he's in the saddle, 2 wheels are definitely faster than 4.
It gets an emotional reaction from people and a more intense feeling than if you just did a series of tricks.
In Riding Down the Dolomites, he moved up to a mountain bike. Hitting speeds of up to 60 kilometers per hour, he thunders down impossibly rocky landscapes in northern Italy. For truly perilous rides like this, you need more than skills and physical fitness.
I'm the kind of guy who always looks forward to how I'll feel afterwards. When I've completed a trick or line, that's a big motivation. But sometimes I'll need 30, 40 or 50 minutes preparation time for mental preparation. Mental strength is an extremely important factor.
So far, the only injuries he's picked up are a few bumps and scratches, some sprains and a broken finger. The 22-year-old is considered a rising star in the biking world. And thanks to his sponsors, he can now focus 100% on his sporting ambitions.
Mir geht es auch einfach darum, dass man
I always want to push myself further and try out new things that nobody has done yet. So I provide my own motivation.
Fabio Wibmer's ambition is to do every project and every video better, and to have fun in the process. And, one way or the other, to make a splash.
Well, next up, we're off to Spain for a closer look at one of Europe's most stunning museums. The Guggenheim in Bilbao has attracted 20 million visitors in the last 20 years. And this year, it was one of the winners at the annual Cultural Brands Awards, where the jury praised its cultural and economic impact on the city of Bilbao. So let's see what makes the Guggenheim so special.
The Guggenheim Museum Bilbao. The spectacular architecture draws large numbers of visitors, making it crucial to the local economy in Spain's Basque Country.
We came all the way over here from Vancouver, Canada, just to see the museum.
I love the temporary exhibitions. They breathe life into the museum.
For me, the museum is beautiful, aspirational, and inspiring.
It's got curvy shapes, straight and flat elements too. It's very interesting.
The museum also showcases artworks outdoors. Jeff Koons' puppy is a particular favorite. And many are fascinated by Louise Bourgeois' huge spider sculpture, Mama. Inside the museum, more cutting-edge 20th and 21st century artworks await the visitors. The 11,000 square meters of exhibition space draw in the crowds with temporary exhibitions of high-profile names, like textile artist Ani Albaz, or video artist Bill Viola. Richard Serra's remarkable walk-in steel sculptures are part of the museum's own permanent collection. But visitors don't come only for the art. There's also exquisite Basque food. The Guggenheim in Bilbao is the first Guggenheim to offer Michelin star cuisine. The museum, run by Bilbao native Juan Ignacio Vidarte, is a success story.
Maybe that's because the museum lets visitors establish a kind of relationship to the artworks. That isn't possible in any other museum in the world. The architecture plays an important role. It's allowed us to showcase modern art in a unique way.
The awe-inspiring building marked a pinnacle in the career of U.S.-Canadian architect Frank Gehry. After 4 years of construction work, it was inaugurated in 1997 as a spin-off of New York's Guggenheim Museum. It was a risky undertaking in the 1990s, when Bilbao was grappling with a decline in its local coal and steel industries. Not exactly fertile ground for an art museum.
This was an old city with an economy traditionally geared to steel and shipbuilding. But those industries were in decline, and unemployment was rampant. Socially, environmentally, and economically, the city lay in ruins.
Today, Bilbao is considered a prime example of a city rejuvenated by investment in architecture and infrastructure. It's prospered from tourism, a phenomenon that's been dubbed the Bilbao effect. And more cultural institutions are coming, like the Azcuna Zentroa venue, renovated by French designer Philippe Starck.
We use the term Bilbao effect to describe the process of reform and transformation of the city. The environmental, social, economic, and cultural dimensions of this process. The Bilbao effect has admirers who want to copy it all over the world.
Locals say the Guggenheim Bilbao put their city on the world map. With 1.2 million visitors last year, the museum surpassed numbers for New York's original Guggenheim. That's generated thousands of jobs in Bilbao. But to stay successful, the museum has to remain creative.
I think that digitalization helps us connect with the public. That way, people can access our collections virtually and prepare their visits before coming. The museum needs to continue pursuing this path.
To celebrate the museum's 20th anniversary in October, light artists projected images from Bilbao's industrial age onto the building's exterior. The past meets a glowing future at the Guggenheim, Bilbao.
Now, while the Guggenheim is routinely praised for its architectural design, the style known as Brutalism is quite often derided. In fact, some describe Brutalist structures as giant concrete monsters. The style flourished between the mid-50s to mid-70s in Europe and was commonly used for government and office buildings. Critics described these structures as cold, dull, and unappealing, and the buildings are routinely demolished these days. But Brutalism is making an unexpected comeback, and an exhibit in Frankfurt is focused on preserving this style for future generations. Let's find out why.
The period after World War II saw the spread of massive concrete blocks in city centres around Europe. The German Architecture Museum in Frankfurt is devoting an exhibition to the construction style known as Brutalism, featuring giant models. The curators had the replicas built to showcase prime examples of Brutalist buildings from around the world.
Our exhibition SOS Brutalism is subtitled Save the Concrete Monsters. We wanted to bring viewers close to the power and the sculptural quality of this era. We have these huge monsters standing around like animals in a zoo. And basically it's a conversation project. We have an endangered species, these concrete monsters, the Brutalist buildings of the 1960s, and our aim is to protect them and raise people's awareness of them.
The AFE Tower in Frankfurt was knocked down, like many other Brutalist buildings. Robin Hood Gardens in London were recently slated for demolition too. The residential block was designed by architect couple Alison and Peter Smithson. They pioneered Brutalism in Britain after World War II, as it rebuilt its destroyed cities. The name Brutalism derives from the French béton brut, meaning raw concrete.
The typical Brutalist building shows its materials plain and naked. There is no covering over it, no paint, nothing that hides the construction. The toughest phase of modernism, which I'd say was Brutalism, fascinates a lot of people because it emerged in that time with a new kind of massiveness.
More than 10% of the buildings from the period are currently threatened with demolition. That's why the website SOS Brutalism was launched. Users helped create a world map showing more than 900 Brutalist buildings, along with an overview of currently endangered examples.
You can use this SOS Brutalism platform to create a kind of public sphere with like-minded people. So we are a kind of concrete grassroots movement.
Many architects are among the fans of Brutalism. Arno Brandelhuber of Berlin applies the principle of Brutalism to his new designs for buildings. He's trying to revamp concrete's poor image.
People seem to automatically associate concrete with big housing projects, surreal and social problems. And they associate natural stone, brass door handles, and wallpaper with happiness and social peace. But is that the way it really is?
In a modest one-family home, he can create more living space by remodeling with concrete. The principle is much space for little money. The Brutalist buildings of the 1950s and 60s paved the way.
The message is, make more from less. And I think this way of thinking, spatial generosity with simpler materials, is a timely stance for architecture.
Haltung, würde ich sagen, in der Architektur.
SOS Brutalism, Save the Concrete Monsters. It's an exhibition that does more than document a trend. It also provides an impetus to change architecture, the way brutalist architecture once shaped the future.
Well, for our next report, we're traveling to a restaurant in the Ukrainian city of Lviv. And it might not be the ideal place to go if you're on a diet. That's because every dish you can order contains the national pork fat delicacy. Salo is an unrendered lard that is cured in wooden boxes for a year. At the Salo restaurant, chefs shape it into sculptures and pair it with anything from potatoes to chocolate.
Unusual foods with strange heads made of cured pork fat. Or sushi wrapped in the pork fat. These culinary offerings can be found in Lviv in western Ukraine. It's home to the restaurant Salo, whose very name means cured pork fat. It serves up dishes made with this popular Slavic specialty.
Pork fat is just tasty.
The Cossacks even ate pork fat when they rode into battle. They kept a supply of it under their saddles to tide them over in bad times.
Part restaurant, part art gallery, Salo is located in Lviv's city center. Its creations are a celebration of cured pork fat. Only dishes which feature this delicacy as the main ingredient find their way onto the menu. Head chef Andriy Chekita picks up the Salo fresh from the market each day. The spiced or salted fatback is cured for a year in a wooden box before it's eaten. Back in the kitchen, the chef cuts the pork fat into wafer-thin strips and presses them into a silicone mold. 250 grams of pork fat go into making each head. After being chilled for an hour at minus 15 degrees Celsius, the edible sculptures are done.
After an hour, I remove the pork fat figure from the mold. And look, it's Putin.
Filled with potatoes, the creation is a favorite among guests here. When they enter the Salo, guests throw a coin into the pig's mouth and receive a vodka as a welcome drink. Here, people can order everything from pork fat sushi to pork fat with chocolate. 28-year-old Tatiana is a regular customer.
Pork fat isn't actually anything unusual or strange. It's a simple meal that can taste really good when it's well spiced, well prepared, and well presented.
The group orders 3 different dishes, 2 pork fat heads and 1 order of pork fat sushi. The sushi on offer here is unique. It's made from chilled pork fat and filled with pickles, green onions, and cut up strips of bread. Next up are the pork fat heads. The garnishes are almost always the same: peppers, pickles, and red cabbage. Then come the meat and fried potatoes. The potatoes also serve as the filling for the pork fat heads. The meal is packed with calories, 2,000 to be precise.
It tastes great, and it looks fabulous too, very extravagant. The pork fat gives the sushi a unique texture. It tastes a bit like white tuna.
And for dessert, there's Marilyn Monroe's lips. It's a mixture of 30% pork fat and 70% ice cream served on a bed of fruit and drizzled with chocolate syrup and strawberry sauce. You won't find it anywhere else.
We tried to create a dish from pork fat and chocolate, but the 2 ingredients wouldn't melt together. So then we had the idea of doing it with ice cream, and that worked.
Ice cream with pork fat? Ukrainians are familiar with this flavor combination, but for foreign visitors, it's a little hard to swallow. The Salo restaurant in Lviv expects guests to be wary, but once they try it, they are won over. And Salo's artistically designed pork fat dishes certainly turn heads.
Well, now to a rather luxurious topic, a jewellery festival in the Austrian capital, Vienna. Events are held in 28 different locations across the city, and visitors can admire the products of 150 different jewellers. One of the highlights of the fair is Michael Berger's kinetic jewellery, which moves with the wearer. We travelled to Vienna to find out what that's all about and catch a glimpse of the gold and the glamour.
For 5 days, Vienna is the place to head for one-of-a-kind necklaces, rings, and brooches. Jewelry collectors and makers meet at the Vienna Jewelry Days. The trade fair starts out with 10 selected artists exhibiting one work each in the Museum for Applied Art. 150 international designers are represented at the Jewelry Days. Here, not everything that glitters is gold. Initiator Christina Werner makes out several trends.
Currently, we have a lot of jewellery in the area of upcycling and recycling. For example, Mario Albrecht of Germany. He uses plastic foils to make brooches. When he's finished, you can't tell what material was used. A really big trend is 3D jewellery. And there are a great many jewellery artists producing gender-neutral jewellery. For instance, a chain that can be worn by a man or a woman.
Jewelry can be a status symbol as much as a fashion accessory. Designers seek to elicit a response to their works.
Many things don't make a tremendous impression at first sight, but when you look at them more closely or understand the humour behind them, then they work at a meta level too.
Dann hat das was und dann hat das auch eine Metaebene. You always have people asking what it's made of or why, and so there is a kind of conversation starting, and I like this.
I work a lot with classic forms of jewellery, but I also try to break with them, sometimes ironically, so that they throw people for a loop.
During the Viennese Jewelry Days, the artists are showcasing their designs in various places across the city. Their pieces range from necklaces from a 3D printer to bracelets made from horn. Michael Berger, a jewelry designer from Germany, is taking part in Vienna for the first time. His rings are rather out of the ordinary.
Kinetic jewelry differs from normal jewelry because even the slightest movement of the wearer sets the piece in motion. So naturally, that attracts attention, more than is usually the case for jewelry.
Michael Berger makes all his pieces in his Dusseldorf studio. The goldsmith learned his techniques from Friedrich Becker, the inventor of kinetic jewelry. Michael Berger often has to work through a number of designs and prototypes before such a piece functions as intended.
Unseen tiny ball bearings, axles, and screws are at work here. I never use magnetism, even if many people assume that at first. It's all precision mechanics that has to be crafted very carefully so that this floating effect comes about.
Michael Berger works with coated stainless steel, gold, silver, and precious stones. His rings cost more than €1,000. Men and women alike can wear his jewelry. Berger is fascinated by people's differing perceptions.
Responses are a bit polarized, I have to say. Some people say it's great, but it would drive me batty. Others say it really calms me down. So people have extremely divergent responses. But they definitely respond, and that's positive. This is a kind of jewelry that doesn't leave anyone cold. So I'm quite content, because it's not jewelry for just anybody.
In addition to exhibitions, the program at the Vienna Jewelry Days includes talks and workshops.
This
is a great forum to present yourself and to meet other artists and people interested in the jewelry scene. For me, exhibiting in Vienna is something new. It's fascinating to see how the locals respond to my work.
His show got off to a good start. The critics at the opening were nothing if not moved by Michel Berger's jewelry.
That's all from us here at Euromaxx for this week. For more Euromaxx content, like our Facebook page where we add new posts every day. From all of us here in Berlin, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again soon.